Welcome to the Organizational Maneuverability Radio Show, defying gravity so your team can soar at altitude, with host Marshall Goldsmith, Executive Coach Randy Swaim. This is Marshall Goldsmith, Executive Coach Randy Swaim, and welcome to the Organizational Maneuverability Podcast today. It's well worth being on here. Totally appreciate it. And very much so glad to have Dan. And I got to kind of, I'll let him correct it if I mispronounce his last name, but it looks like it's Persiantsev.
Persiantsev, yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. So an honor to have Dan on today. So let me just let Dan introduce himself, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit about what he wants to bring today.
Sure. So thank you for having me on the show, Randy. And I've been in the business of aviation for about 3 years. I started in logistics and supply chain, and really my sort of bread and butter in sales started in car sales. And really haven't looked back since, through a series of connections. And a very good mentor of mine, he kind of got to where I'm at right now.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, that's cool. And let's face it, logistics and supply chain is a critical area for any company to be involved in, really, in today's world. And that's very related to the organizational maneuverability concept. Because guess what? When not everything is totally expected, guess what? There's times where you have to adapt in this supply chain and making sure that's supplying things so that your company can be very effective in that. And let me just, if you don't mind me asking this, let me just ask this with the supply chain stuff. Have you found times along the way that made it, that there were particular challenges that maybe were unexpected or something like that you had to kind of rethink, or what are some of the times that maybe came up like that?
Oh, all the time. I mean, logistics and supply chain.
Guess what? Very aligned to organizational maneuverability for sure.
Yeah, so, exactly.
What are some ways, and how would you describe some of the times where it really did what you're talking about?
Sure. So, I mean, it's really a case-by-case basis. So I dealt with a lot of drivers directly. So when they would have to go from point A to point B, they would be on a, on a whole list. Yeah. So when they had to deliver a load to a place, sometimes the bill of lading, which showed, okay, this is the material that you have. And if you have it, great. If you don't, nobody was able to get paid. And because it's all, everything is connected in the supply chain, a lot of parties were affected in that respect.
And it's that way in teams as well. You know what? And no two ways about it. When you're talking about supply chain, like you're saying, if factors come on that change something that was unexpected, guess what? That affects everybody. And,
that's true.
And that is true. So if you don't mind me, and you don't have to share any specific, you don't have to share names, you don't have to share company names or anything like that, but just what are some of the examples that kind of really presented themselves in what you're talking about there? What are some of the pictures of how it really came up in a way that, whoa, made everybody have to change or think or whatever? What are just a couple of examples of that?
Sure. So, I mean, as you know, America runs from all these truck drivers, right? All over.
I don't know what we do without them. That's for sure.
Exactly. So this is very similar to the aviation industry, because without these pilots, none of these charter clients of ours would be going to their destination. So it was sort of that moment of realization that, okay, it has to do with them. Without them, so they had to make sure they were happy, they were being paid on time, and all these different things, and all these systems were put in place. So I would say the time when that really struck was when the shipper contacted us directly and said, hey, like, where's the driver? What's going on here? I won't mention names, as you said. These were pretty big companies.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
Yeah,
sometimes the shipper, and is that something that you all supplied, or is it something that that the driver came from somewhere else?
it was from somewhere else. So some of them
Okay.
worked on independent contractors, others worked with these companies directly. So
Hmm.
it was a mix.
Yeah. And you know
Yeah,
what? That's very logical and very sort of normal in a lot of situations. And so let me
it
ask you
is.
this: when you think about it, and it's kind of a struggle when they call you up and said, "Oh, by the way, we don't have a driver," oh, you kind of thing, um, no two ways about it. But if you think about it, what are there certain ways where you just kind of saw certain pictures where companies kind of overcame that at the moment, or maybe adjusted for it, or whatever? What were some of the ways that you saw that doing? Because what you brought up, and you have my compliments, Dan, because this whole aspect of supply chain management and all that is such a key part of everything we do. And I know in my military background, guess what?
Mhm.
Logistics is huge when you got to win the war, kind of thing, or win a battle. And
Oh
and
yeah.
and so when you're talking about strategic planning in your company and everything, it's critical. So what are some of the ways that the insights came out of maybe nowhere that made them kind of rethink, perhaps re-strategize,
Mhm.
perhaps go forward a little bit on it? What stands out to you on that? What did you notice in the way that some of those companies reacted, or what did they need to do differently?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, being that these are really big companies, and I'll kind of tie it into the private aviation sector,
Sure.
these operators have multiple different planes in their fleet, and they are sort of profiting off from their own clients, if you will,
Hmm.
right? And there's a
Yeah.
whole, I won't go into too much detail on this.
Right.
There's the owner who has their own plane, and then the operators, they take, a certain cut from that.
Yeah.
And then there's the brokers on top of that. So that's how that works. And
Hmm.
tying it also into logistics, big companies, they're able to fill the need just like that.
In what
And
way, if you don't mind me asking? That's a good point with what you said. Where companies kind of are able to fill a need in just like that. In what ways do they do that? Do they find they got to go out and bring in a new driver and train him? I'm being joking with that, or
yeah,
how do they plan within their strategy to amend those challenges when they happen? Or do they have that, or do they have
yeah.
to kind of be able to be flexible right at the point of attack on it?
Yeah, that is a very good point. Flexibility, adaptability, and
Mhm,
resilience. I mean, those are the three things that really sort of categorize who is successful in these two industries.
mhm.
Uh, in terms of that question, yeah, I mean, with logistics and supply chain, because they're such big companies, what I noticed is they usually have an internal team that can do these loads for them or negotiate with shippers, find customs and
Oh,
do
yeah.
all of that. So what I realized is it has to really do with speed of execution. The quicker you can get to the clients and these big companies, the quicker you can get the business and you can deliver on your promise and of course figure out the solution. And it ties in with private aviation too.
Yeah. And I think you're exactly right there. Just in your thought with what you just said, how does it tie in with private aviation for that? Because I think you're right. Just in your experience, in your vision of that, how does that sort of play in?
Uh, Big time. Being
Yeah, I
private
agree with you.
aviation. Yeah, yeah. So we'll start with the thing that not everybody is flying private, right? And if they
Hmm.
are, they usually have friends or family. They go on somebody else's plane, or
Hmm.
they go through a broker like myself, or some of these really big companies like NetJets or
Yeah.
Wheels Up, who've been in the industry for many years. So as far as that's concerned, I mean, it's a lot. A
Yeah.
lot goes
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. And what you're bringing up there is, and you kind of said this, and I just want to kind of mention this and highlight what you said because it's true. Um, with the adaptability and all of that kind of stuff. The other part of this is, and you kind of implied this, is that companies that want to be truly successful in these kind of environments, in a sense, their strategic planning has to prepare for when things don't work.
Yes.
And you kind of implied that. Yeah, my compliments on that, because if your company is not preparing for the unexpected, guess what? You ain't going to get there, and you're not going to be successful. And by the way people experience your service is not going to be what you want it to be. And when you talk about this aspect of organizational maneuverability, it's a key thing that I sort of talk about. And how much this, because you mentioned that they have teams within the company that can go kind of fix that kind of thing. But
Hmm.
what do the teams need to be aware of, and particularly the leader of the teams? Uh, what do they need to be aware of, even before the case?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Thank
It
you.
really comes down to the market knowledge that they have, and of course their product.
And that's not
Because
superficial, is it?
yeah, no, this is
That's
it's the
true.
logic of everything, right? You go into any business, you better know the industry, or at least you have a book of business that you've had for many years. I was fortunate that I didn't have a book of business, but I met a very good, who's my boss right now at the current company I'm with, and he really helped me out. I mean, he's like, okay, here's an opportunity.
If you don't mind me saying so, please don't feel like you need to share anything you don't want to. But when you say your boss really helped you out, in what way did he help you out? Because I think you're going to what I'm thinking about and what I've kind of implied.
Sure. So he just kind of gave me the idea that one, there's a lot more in the world of logistics and supply chain, and then with private aviation, and it just kind of it lit me up. Like I was extremely excited. Even before then, it took me 5 years to actually get to the aviation space because I was
Hmm.
calling companies. I was like, I want to be part of this. I want to learn about it.
Yeah.
And for me, it was love at first plane. Yeah,
Yeah.
literally. I would look at a private jet and I was like, wow, this is very cool. And I started reading about it. And then I started just kind of visualizing myself in that space. And it fired me up. And to this day,
So he sort of
24/7.
created a vision in you.
Yeah.
Not that he did it or that he created what he wanted, but he helped you build it within yourself.
Yes.
And how did he do that? Because we're talking
Just
about a good leadership perspective here. In your experience with him, speaking of him in a positive way, how
of
did he
course.
do that?
He shared with me his experience, how he got in the business,
Okay,
and we just kept in touch for many years.
cool,
Yeah.
cool. And if you think about it, when you talk about leading teams in an environment which is not overly academic, not superficial, it's uh, unexpected in some respects, kind of
Mhm.
thing. That's what you got to do with your people. And I know on one or two of my blogs on my website and a couple of my shorter videos that I have on my YouTube channel, I sort of mentioned this, that the, so often today, and what you're describing is very aligned with this, and I just want to kind of give it credit for that. But what a lot of people don't realize is when you're talking about being a manager or leader, those are a little bit different, but they're both good skills they got to have. But I'll tell you what, if you're being a leader, if all you're doing is wait until something happens and then you tell them what to do, you're not being a good leader. What you
Mhm.
want to do, and I think from what you're saying, this is kind of what this manager did to you, in a good way, kind of thing, that when you're talking about being a leader, what you're really doing is you're developing your team along the way so that down the road when something happens that's not expected, they can already bring success to it. They can notice how they got to adapt, and they're also looking for it. And you kind of mentioned this, that he helped to build your vision within yourself of what you wanted
Hmm.
to do. And that's a big part of it, is creating the vision in what we may need to do if we have to do this, and those kind of things. And these are key aspects that you're kind of bringing some evidences of it and everything. That is what true leaders need to be totally aware of in organizational maneuverability aspects. When not everything that comes on the scene is rotely academic, uh, and so you're a manager at that point. With what he did, it sounds like he totally would have my compliments for kind of what he did.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah,
he's been in the business for, oh gosh, 20, 30 years or so, and
cool.
he's done a lot. So
Yeah.
I'm extremely grateful to him.
Hmm. And what he did is very different from most other people out there,
That's true.
unfortunately. But that's an insight that we have to have. And guess what? For all of us, particularly, and with you too in your environment, how uh, let me ask you this: with people that you work with, do you bring some of those same skills to working with them? Um, and if so, how do you do that?
I love that question.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. This
I
this
bring
is
some decent questions, I think.
I like it. I like it because it really, a lot of the podcasts, they usually, there's a lot of fluff, right? And this just
Mhm.
goes right to the heart of the matter. So I really like
It,
that a lot.
thank
I
you. I'm
appreciate
I'm
that.
a little bit different in a lot of things that I do, because so yeah. But how did that kind of develop you, and how you work with your people, and in what ways um, do you maybe even do that a little different? So thank you for your comments on that question.
Of course, of course. Yeah. So my really good friend, same company that we work with together, he, we talk about everything from financial markets to stocks to golf, everything. And indirectly, yeah, I mean, with, now that you mention it, yeah, it's, I don't even realize that I'm doing it, but it's, yeah, and
So how do
he
you do
feels
that?
like,
Good.
I
And
don't know,
and
it's just there.
you have my compliments for what you're saying, because you know what it comes to across to me in the way you're saying it. When you said that you're not even aware that you're doing it, it became part of your nature.
Yeah.
And guess what? You're doing it. So how are you doing it? You have my compliments on that, basically. What are some examples on how you're doing that to the people that you work with? Just in some, maybe one or two occasions where it stands out to you, says, "Oh yeah, wow, yeah," kind of thing. But when your previous boss and friend developed you, this is something you became. It's not just about him getting credit and or anything like that. It's about who you're becoming, and it sounds like you became that. And so, let me just offer this: at how, kind of how, in maybe a few examples of how you interacted with your team and your people. How do you bring that? How, just in some examples of thinking back, what are some ways where you sort of brought that on maybe one or two specific situations?
Yeah, I mean, I can really tell you specific situations. I just
Okay,
know that whenever we have a conversation, like, it's always moving forward. It's never,
good.
in staying in one spot and then nothing happens.
Yeah, that's good. And how do you do that? You don't have to give the details of a particular conversation, but kind of
Sure.
how does that conversation go that brings that you're talking about?
I guess I have the gene that my father passed on to me, who's passed away many years ago,
Uh-huh.
and he just had this innate ability. He just knew. So I guess it's like an inner knowing, and you can being an empath. Really, that's really what it is.
So in
Yeah.
empath, in what way? How so? Because you have my compliments, whether it seems you're going with this. Yeah, you have my compliments on that, Dan. And so when you say kind of being an empath, how? What are you doing?
Nothing in particular. I listen. I'd rather listen than speak, and I really enjoy hearing people. It's
And you know
it's
what?
really it.
What you just described is so critical when you're talking about leading your team in unpredictable, rapidly changing environments, because not everything fits a rote academic, you know, thing. And there are times when, as a leader, you got to do this. You got to go, yeah, you know what? You do. And there have been a couple of times where I've done that for teams that I've led in my journey and all. And what you just shared is a critical aspect about it. When you're being a true leader, there are times where you got to just sit there and listen.
Hmm.
You got to listen to what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, what they're uh, doing, all that. Um, and I'll just share this with you. It's in my autobiography, very aligned with what you're saying there. At a point where I was in uh, a strategic air defense contractor company,
Hmm.
the manager of our particular site uh, at an Air Force base um, was really causing a problem. And you know what? I was not the legal leader yet. I kind of was a leader in who I was becoming. But I listened to the struggle that the teammates were having with him, and they all called the director of the program, the national director of the program. And there was one day at when I got home from my house that my phone went off, and I picked up the phone, and it was this manager from down here in Virginia.
Hmm.
And he said, "Do you mind having a conversation?" And I said, "What?" He said, and then I asked him, I said, "Well, let me ask you this. Is this for the record, or are we just having a chat?" And he looked at me and he said, "Well, let's put it this way." He said, um, it technically it's for the record, but I will not share it with anybody unless you give me permission." I said, "Okay." And we talked
All
for a
right.
little bit. And after I kind of shared kind of what I experienced from the teammates as the problem, he said, "Randy, what would you do in this case?" And I went, "Hmm." And I shared kind of what I would do if I were the leader. And toward the end of the phone call, he said, "Well, Randy, would you go down there and do that?" I said, "Are you asking me what I think you're asking me?" He said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Have you called him and talked to him yet?" He said, "No, not yet." I said, "Call him." I said, if you later on, if you want to come back and ask me, yeah, I'll do that." And guess what? They let that manager go, and they promoted me to be the manager. And about 3 months after I took over, they actually published a document that said Randy took a problem site and turned it into the showcase of the company in minimum time. And why?
Wow.
Because just what you're talking about there, I took the time to listen to the people. I took the time um, to not go stupid with it. Are there times when you got to kind of give them some thoughts? Yeah, but
Absolutely. Yeah.
you can shut their brains down. If you look at it from a neuroscience standpoint, you can shut their brains down at a point where you're not helping things, if that's all you're doing. So when you talk about listening to people, that is huge. And sometimes asking collateral questions with it to get them to display their mental processing for you to help out. And what you're saying is real key. And I'll just kind of share this with you. I know we're getting close to the end here, but Dan, several of the things that you brought out in this are are key when you're talking about bringing true leadership into a rapidly changing and challenging, unexpected environment. And so you have my compliments on that. And it sounds like you're actually that's kind of how you're still working with people. Would you agree with that? I mean, just from what you're saying, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, that's 100%. And also, I have the same qualities within me that I just tell myself, okay, show up a A level, A player every
Yeah,
single day, no matter
yeah.
what it is.
And it's not just for your attention, but it's for the success and what you're bringing. And
Hmm.
that's kind of what it sounds like you're saying. And I just let you give a nod on that if you want, or debate it or whatever kind of thing. But those are some key aspects about when you're talking about leading your teams in those kind of environments. So it's very, very key, very, very critical for people to realize.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, let me
Absolutely.
ask you this: is go ahead. I'm sorry.
And really to kind of summarize this, I mean, it's amazing when you can take a person from one space and then just transport them into another where they feel that they know that they can do it and more. I mean, that's just, and it's the same with clients, right?
And that doesn't happen just because the way you tell them what to do. That doesn't happen that way, and that's what a lot of people in society doesn't understand about it really. And it's the
Yeah.
way with clients too, as you're saying. Yeah, yeah. In sales, having a true leadership aspect of it isn't, you can make it successful in that way. So, so you have my compliments on just kind of what you're describing there with your background and kind of what you're bringing today and all, because all that is very aligned with this whole organizational maneuverability concept. So let me just kind of do this because I know we're getting close to the end here. Let me just give
Sure.
you any last minute comments that you want to make just real quick before we shut down.
Last minute comments. I mean, I think other than thank you for having me on the podcast, I think also, anybody who's watching this, I mean, it might sound cliche, but believe in yourself and you can create anything you want and give people that confidence within themselves to do whatever it is that they want.
And you know what? It is key with what you're saying. If your team fully believes that, not only in themselves, but in the team as a synergistic team, you can do amazing things that nobody else would ever expect.
Hmm.
So cool, cool. Well, I tell you what.
And
Oh, go ahead, Dan.
one last thing, Randy. And
Sure,
for
go ahead.
me, private aviation, it's a calling. Like I think about this 24/7. I mean, people
Hmm.
don't realize this. I think about it. I visualize it, and I see myself in that space, just chartering this all over the world, helping businesses. You gotta have that. You
And you
gotta
know what?
want it. And
It's a critical environment for a lot of what we're talking about. and
yeah,
and so you have my compliments for that and for the ocean in which you're putting it, kind of thing. So
yeah,
Dan, you have my compliments on that. Let me just say it's been an honor to have you on with some of the things that you shared, and I appreciate your willingness to be here. And who knows, maybe we'll get on another show and talk a little bit at some point down the road. But listen, you have my compliments for what you're doing. You have my compliments for what you've learned and who you've become, uh, and all that, and kind of how you're going about what you're doing in the environment that you're in. So, Dan, you just totally have my compliments for that. And I just want to take the second to say thank you and appreciate all you're doing, my friend.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Randy. I really appreciate you having me on the podcast. And also, we're kindred spirits here. So I think what you're creating also with the organization maneuverability, I think a lot of people will kind of dive deeper into their organizations and see, okay, you're the guy for this, can really change a lot of people's lives.
There you
So
go.
thank
Well,
you for
listen,
that.
man, appreciate it. I'm glad that we've been on today. You have a great one. I'll let you go get some lunch, and and we'll maybe see you again, Dan. Honor to have you on today.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.